Hi, everybody. I'm John Luxon. I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Welcome to another edition of Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, and relationship building in Florida's film, television, commercial, and digital media production industry. Today, we're talking about grips and gaffers. Both of these roles are integral to the success of a time on set, and I'm excited to have this group of great workers with us today. In a moment, we're going to ask our guests to introduce themselves. Then I'll ask a few questions to get things going. During that time, we're going to ask that everybody keep their microphones on mute to avoid any background noise. After we've gotten through initial questions, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and conversations, as we always do. At that time, please use the hand-raising function so we can call on you. We want this to be conversational and interactive, but we also don't want everybody talking at the same time. We're going to ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of the fairness of others that want the opportunity. A new request, if you're going to use the chat box, please keep the conversation pertinent to the discussion. The last few months, we've had a few conversations kind of get off the rails in the chat box, and attendees have asked me to ask that the chat box not be a distraction to the conversation. Film Florida Fridays are free, but we hope you'll consider donating $20.23 for our 2023 fundraising campaign. The donation link will be posted in our chat box throughout the discussion. You can also find that on the website. You can also, we'd ask you to consider joining Film Florida. That information is also going to be in the chat box. And with that, I want to introduce our guests. First, starting with the grips, we have Earl Perque and Mike Germaine. Then we have our gaffers, Zoot Byrne and Jim Pescrille. So let's get started. So Jim, I want to start with you. For those that aren't aware, let's start at the very beginning. Let's define what a gaffer is, and then tell us what your bio and your background is.
Sure. Thank you, John. Gaffer is the headlighting guy in charge of the set, the electricity on the set, in charge of safety pertaining to electricity. That person's role is liaising with the cinematographer about lighting, getting the equipment ready on prep, hiring the crew, and the logistics and facilitating the setup and tear down of the lighting equipment, generators, cable, whatnot, to do with the lighting. I'm sure Zoot can expand on this. I started way back in the early 80s in a rental shop. 2 or 3 years just fixing stuff, loading trucks, and then started freelancing, and that's kind of how I became an electrician first, and then eventually a gaffer. And I think I was pushed into gaffing by some co-workers, cinematographers, DPs who wanted me to help them with some projects, commercials initially. John, thank you.
Zoot, over to you. What's your background and your bio?
Well, it goes back to the 80s. Jim and I first met. I was doing a music video, I think, of Johnny Halliday in Nashville, and Jim brought a generator there and stayed to operate. And actually, he and I then continued to work together whenever I had projects in that area. I then moved to Florida, and lo and behold, the second place I moved to, who was my neighbor, but Jim and his lovely wife. And we continued our conversations and friendships there. I was a best boy for a long time, and then I graduated and wandered into being a gaffer or whatever. And as such, then Jim and I sort of didn't get together anymore because we all moved to different places or whatever. I still being a gaffer. I've actually worked on sets with him in a different capacity. Well, he has been a gaffer or whatever. So it's all been all over the place, all over Florida for most time, whatever. I have worked in other countries. I have worked in the Caribbean. Lighting gets more and more a matter of logistics when you go down to the islands, because half the time the equipment either doesn't arrive, or it's substandard, or it just doesn't work, or lo and behold, as Jim I'm sure can tell you, it's the wrong voltage. And so we have a lot of problems there too. I've been working in California for a while. Now I'm back here in Florida, and looking, I'm here if anyone needs any help.
Excellent, excellent.
Gaffer,
Earl,
I'll tell you, the original gaffer is actually a term from gaslighting days in England, because the guy who went around and lit all the gas lights was actually called a gaffer, and he had a long pole which he strike the torch up above.
Okay.
And
I did not know that. Steve, we're already learning stuff. That's awesome. Earl, let's go over to you on the grip side. Give us your background, and then as well as define what a grip actually is.
Well, my background, I'm from Louisiana, and when I was a teen, I was a kid who I had a Super 8 movie camera, and I would run around doing the family videos, and my friends jumping their bikes on, homemade ramps and stuff. So I was always interested in doing movies, and actually I did a fair amount of stills photography. I freelanced for a daily newspaper for a bit. And then I got a job I worked for an oil company for 9 years back in Louisiana. I got tired of doing that because it was the same thing every day, walking through the same office, the same gate, day after day after day. And if you talk to any of these guys later on, you'll see that most of the people who do what we do, we're not people who can sit behind a desk and work somewhere for 30 years. We do what we do for 30 years, and we all have, but we do it because it's different every day. So segue, I got tired of doing that. I had a family friend who was in Miami and was a commercial guy. And I talked to him. I said, look, I want to get out of this oil company thing. And he said, well, come check it out. Come to Miami and see if it's something you want to do. So I went there, and he didn't promise me a job or anything. He made a contact with a guy, John Boisseau, which is at the time owned Lights, Cables, and Heavy Stuff, which used to be where the Wingate dump, which is where they're talking about building that studio in Fort Lauderdale. So anyway, I show up there, 8 o'clock one morning, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm in the movie business. I'm gonna learn how to do all this stuff. Well, he hands me a paint can and a paint roller, and I'm painting walls in the shop. Nothing to do with light, I'm painting, okay? So I go home that night. I just moved from Louisiana, hauled everything. I'm here. And I say, I'm going like, what the hell? I left a good paying job. I left good benefits and, all that stuff. And I'm here in Miami painting walls in a shop. What was I thankking? So fast forward, that painting project finished, which was a week or so, and then I thankfully met John Banner at another shop in Miami. He owns Film Trade. John took me in. He was looking for a guy to work in the shop. I worked in the shop. Probably met Zoot coming through there. Basically, you work in the rental house just like Jim did, and you meet a lot of people who are coming in to rent equipment. So it's a good way to meet people and to learn the equipment, because you're not going to go out on a job and I'm going to be a grip and you don't know what the hell all the equipment is and how to use it. So I did that for a bit, and then he had a job that went to Martinique, and he said, look, I'm sending some gear to Martinique on a TV series. I need you to go there with the gear and work on the crew, but basically you're going there to watch the equipment. That went for 3 seasons, and that kind of jump started me, to the whole film and television thing. And here I am 30 years later after I moved to Miami and was painting a wall in an equipment house. So that's how I got started. As far as what a grip does, similar to the electrician, to Jim, we work with the cinematographer. We also work alongside, in harmony most of the time with the gaffer. And also we work alongside the camera department, because we control light, whether it be Jim's lights that are going all over the place and we have to cut it off of a wall, that's us, or the sun, we diffuse the sun. Sometimes we have to make the sun look the same. You're shooting a scene all day on the screen. That's like a 1-minute scene. Well, the sun's moved, all over the place. So you have to make it look consistent with the combination of Jim's lights and what we're doing with the sun. So that's one thing we do. Another thing is camera movement, which is we have a dolly grip who moves a camera, moves a crane. We rig cameras on cars, on trains, on boats, or in a swing set above a kid swinging for a commercial, different things like that. We also, they might say, oh, we need to put some equipment up the stairs. Well, we need to get the grips to build a ramp. So that's us. We do that. Or the editing suite on a location, they said, oh, we need to block the windows. We can't see what we're doing in there. They call the grips to do it. Basically, we're a jack of all trades and do everything. Basically, a lot of construction type stuff, building platforms and that sort of stuff, but mainly light control and camera movement are the two main things.
Excellent. And Mike, finally over to you. Give us your background and how did you find your way into being a grip?
Hi, everybody. I moved to Florida in 1999. I was in Boston first, working in music and a little bit in music video. I moved to Pittsburgh after that and was part of a startup that was doing virtual reality. And when Y2K came around, they didn't really make the cut. So we had to make a decision. We decided to come to Florida. From there, we moved straight to the beach because I was missing the beach. I lived on the beach in Boston. And basically, a really good childhood friend of mine was in Orlando. He was one of the top gaffers over there. And he said, we need some help on a show. And I didn't know anything about, bigger shows. It was a show called Celestine Prophecy. And I was hired as a rigging electrician. And that was how I got my card. But I realized that I really was more drawn toward like what was happening on set with the camera and figured out that, that's more where I wanted to be. So that kind of like veered into that realm. And what is it, 24 years later or something, and here I am. So it's been amazing. I've worked with all these great guys up here. Florida's a big state. I live on the coast, so everywhere I go, I'm pretty much on location. So that's been very interesting because I've had a chance to work all over the state, and I've done movies with Zoot in other countries, and it's been a great ride, basically. My background is started with doing a lot of movies over at Universal with a producer named Wayne Morris, and got my opportunities to start as a grip, basically hauling sandbags. And then I was watching, I was learning. So I got a chance to set flags and cut light and then eventually dolly grip. And then I started best boying, and then I got my opportunity to key grip, and I really never looked back. It's been amazing.
Very cool. Earl, I want to jump back over to you. What makes a good grip?
I say the first thing is a great attitude. I will take, I'm a best boy normally. I'm not a key grip like Mike. I'm the second guy underneath the key grip, which I should have explained. It's the key grip, the best boy, then the dolly grip, and then the grips. But I'm a best boy normally, and I'm the one that, if they say we need 2 more guys tomorrow, I'm the one that gets on the phone and looks for 2 more people. So I will pick a guy with a great attitude over a more experienced guy with a bad attitude. That's what I say. That's the main thing. The second thing is you have to pay attention on set. With this thing right here, it makes it really hard. It's a change. It's changed from what it was 30 years ago. Zoot and Jimmy can tell you that, and Mike too. We've all been around for a long time. The advent of the cell phone, nobody pays attention. I'm not saying nobody. The good guys pay attention, but a lot of people are on their phone. They're on Facebook. They're on whatever. And it's difficult because you need to really be paying attention. And so that's like a good guy will pay attention and be watching the gaffer, be watching the key grip, be watching the DP, etc. You also need to have basic mechanical skills, because what we do is, you might have to cut a piece of wood, you might have to bolt something together, you might have to, build a platform for the actor to stand on, build the platform for Jim to put a light on. You have to have basic mechanical skills to do the job. Also, a lot of the things we use are heavy. So, you got to not be worried about lifting heavy things. And I'd say the another thing besides great attitude is the importance of being on time. I can guarantee you, if you always show up late to this type of job, you're not going to last very long because people are going to stop hiring you. So if you're like, show up 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late on this is the type of job. If you're not 10 or 15 minutes early, you're late. I mean, I hate to say it, but this is how it is. So that's the main things I look for when I'm looking for a great grip.
Zoot, how about you? Anything? I mean, I think what Earl's saying kind of goes across the board, but anything specific from your perspective on looking for a great gaffer?
Well, as Jim said, we spent a lot of time working with crew and things like that or whatever. And building on what Earl says, I think good grips and good electricians, and good key grips and good gaffers will instinctively know ahead of what needs to happen next or whatever. So if the DP turns around and says, well, I think that's going to be too bright, then we've already thought about the fact, well, I can get Earl to put a flag up or I can put some diffusion on it or whatever. So paying attention is it, and in all cases, I think. And I think Jim will agree with me. If you know what's going on, then you can anticipate what's going to happen next. So everything then doesn't become a huge rush. The business works a lot with hurry up and wait, unfortunately. And that's when the people, like Earl says, pick up their cell phones and wander off and start talking or whatever. We'll do a lot of heavy lifting, heavy work in a very short period of time. And then there will be periods of time when there is actually nothing happening. You're being quiet because of the scene being shot. But again, you are anticipating on what's coming next. You can look at the schedule and talk to the first AD and say, well, where are we going next? Can I get ahead or whatever? And all these guys I've worked with before are all good at doing that. I want to, it's already here. That's the best thing you can do in all times. I want to, it's here. Can you bring me? Well, I brought two. So it's people paying attention. And those people that do pay attention will get hired more and more and more. And if they wish, they'll be able to ascend up to the ranks of the
Unknown caller.
I don't know what that was. So yeah, paying attention, being on time and being alert and knowing what's going on in your surroundings. Because that comes back to safety issues again. People pick up a ladder and not even be concerned with what's happening at the other end. They're looking at one end of it. I mean, if you're not paying attention to your surroundings, then there's a lot of things that can go wrong.
Right. Yeah, Jim, let me ask you a quick question. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to get into kind of this line of work, is there specific training? Is there classes, or is it one of these on-the-job training things that you got to do for real?
Well, there's some classes that I recommend. I think Contract Services is the website that has a lot of safety classes. Nothing specific to grip or electric per se, but there's a lot of information about what to expect when you get on a set, helicopter safety, things like that. I recommend somebody who wants to get into business to go look at Contract Services website and check out those classes and bulletins. The other thing is I wanted to point out that tools are very important. You got to come to work with your tools. The guys were saying, you got to be a mind reader a lot of times, which is true, because a lot of times there's a lot of nonverbal communication, especially when you're filming and trying to be quiet. But tools are important. If somebody shows up without a knife or gloves or an earpiece for their walkie, it's almost as bad as showing up late, like Earl said, which is a bad thing. But getting into the business is, like I said earlier, starting in a shop really helped me because you got to know the equipment. Number one, you got to know if they call for a stinger, if they call for a C-stand, if somebody calls for a piece of equipment, an apple box, something simple, you got to know what it is. And number two, you got to know how it all goes together. So you got to know that the HMI has the header cable and it plugs in and then it goes to the ballast, and that, you know, you strike it from a certain place and things get set up a certain way. You have to concern about safety and stuff like that. But the thing is that knowing the equipment, I think, is really paramount to getting on a job and doing well. Because you don't want to be a guy that goes to a truck and has to ask, where is this? You know, what is this? Or what is this? You know, that's kind of the crux of it, John.
Yeah, good. Mike, you know, I know, you know, it all depends on project. I'm going to jump to this quick question in the chat from Josh, who's from Miami-Dade College. How many grips are typically hired on a production? I mean, I know it depends on production size and all that, but let's just say we're talking about a good sized television series or a commercial or something like that. I mean, Earl kind of outlined a little bit of the different levels, but what are we looking at? Is it 2 people? Is it 10 people?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. It really does depend on the project. But I want to go back to just so we can kind of, you know, narrow this down a little bit. But what Earl was saying, what Zoot and Jim were saying is that, you know, you need to find a really strong cross section of who's doing what, and also a combination of youth and experience. You know, when Earl and I sit down to do a crew, I'm going to get to the point, I promise. We basically, you know, we'll talk about, okay, what is this project going to entail? We don't always know from the very beginning, and a lot of things, you know, you have to be flexible and willing to kind of grow or scale back if needed. But we start with what is this job going to need? And some jobs we might have 2 dolly grips, we might have 3 dolly grips, depends on the scale of the show. So I would say that's how you would know, you know, the best way to go about crewing this is to start with, okay, what are we shooting? And that's what I always tell people, you know, is like, know the project, know what your place is within the project, and how you're going to bring your best, how we're going to get the best out of you, because some people are really good carpenters. Some people are excellent at climbing up into, you know, catwalks and doing different things where some people aren't. Some guy that's, you know, 280 pounds, he can carry 2, you know, large stands at the same time. There's going to be another guy who's wiry, who's like going to be the guy who you want to get up and get in there and do something that somebody that's large may not be able to do. More of like a person who's more like has a climbing physique, you know. So there's just a lot that goes into it. So basically, Earl and I would sit down, we'd say, okay, this is what we think we're going to need. We go back to production, tell them this is what it's going to take. And then we set our crew based on the knowledge that we have at the moment, right, Earl? Basically. So
you're correct. And you're correct. There's no finite number. There is one key grip. There could be multiple dolly grips. There could be as few as, like on a television series, for instance, is normally, I'd say, minimum of 4 grips, regular grips, after the dolly grips, 4 regular grips. And it can be more than that. And depending on what the workload is, if you go day exterior, you might add 2 or 3 guys. You know, it depends on the work. But I'd say a base number on a television series or a movie, a base would be key grip. In most cases these days, 2 dolly grips and probably 4 grips. And then you build from there. That's probably a good base number, wouldn't you say, Mike, for television and movies to start with?
Then most likely a rigging crew also, which, you know, that's a whole nother, you know, kind of a subgroup, but equally as important. It's important that we're staying out ahead of each other, that we're going in behind and wrapping. And a lot of times that's the rigging crew. And that's going to have their own basic, you know, team. And so, you know, I would say on a TV show, you would have a rigging crew, you know, if it's a decent sized TV show. So that's a whole nother thing that Earl and I need to coordinate and figure out. And There is just a lot that goes into it. It's kind of like spinning a lot of plates, but then doing the work during the day. And as we know, as department heads, it's a 7-day-a-week kind of job. You have to always be staying out in front of it, and then making sure that people are happy and that they feel comfortable. And you bring the emotional side into it. It's a lot. People like Earl, who I've had the privilege of working with on several occasions. It's like he's so paramount in how the whole thing runs, and a lot of that is things that I may not even hear. He might be just basically not providing the information because he doesn't necessarily think it's what I need on my plate. But there's just a lot that goes into what a best boy does, and I completely appreciate them. And so I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that was good. Jim, let me go to you. I mean, on the gaffer side, I mean, what's a typical crew for a gaffer for a television or big commercial television movie, that type of thing?
Well, let me explain that the grips and gaffers were very similar as far as architecture. We have pretty much one boss, which is the cinematographer, DP, and then the cinematographer has basically three things he's in charge of: camera, grip, and lighting. As far as electrics, gaffer, and lighting, there is the gaffer, the head of the electric department, and then a best boy, just like Earl. Earl's a best boy grip. I would have a best boy electric. And then there are other positions, and this brings up the point that I think it's invaluable to learn skills, these new skills that are out there now for electrics, wireless, the apps that are on the iPads and whatnot. There's Blackout and Luminaire. Those two apps are very good at controlling lights. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The skinny is that you need a multitude of people: board ops, lamp operators, generator operators, rigging crew. We need all these people who are under the key, like myself or Zoot, to do their jobs and facilitate this massive amount of work that comes with TV shows and movies for lighting and grip. And that's kind of it. I recommend that if you want to get into business, and this goes back, John, to the earlier question, that you learn some of these extra skills, whether it's learning just how to balance a load on a generator, which is not difficult, but you have to take you have to have an amp probe, which is a clamp-on electrical device that goes around a cable that checks the ampacity, the load. You have to have a voltmeter. You have to know that certain lamps take a certain amount of amperage and the size of your generator. And that it's more involved than that, but there's nuances of cable size and whatnot that people can pick up pretty easily. And once again, back at the shop, I keep going back to the shop. There's a lot of stuff in the shops that you can just learn very fast. Maybe a year or more if you don't know anything, but that's a good place to start once again. But a best boy is invaluable, and Earl is a very good best boy, I got to point out.
Earl, a lot of compliments today.
Stop it already.
Zoot, let me, all of this talking about, the needs and the importance of it, inevitably, like I'm not in the role, so it just feels like inevitably you guys go to somebody and say, we need 6 people on this crew, and they say, okay, great, here's your 4. We don't have the budget for 6. How do you handle that situation where you just inevitably don't have enough hands to do the job, but that's what they got?
Well, that depends how intense it gets, because if we really do need 6 and they only want to pay for 4, we probably end up settling on 5, right, Earl? But
yeah, that or I mean, at some point you have to kick it back to your other boss, the cinematographer, and say, look, you want us to do this. I don't know if we can do it with the manpower we have. And he either he's going to compromise
in the time given.
yeah.
Well, we're shooting budgets these days, not films or commercials. Well, we're shooting a budget. And the producer will look and say, well, why do you need all these people? Well, they're just standing around. Well, that's often the case. I would like to, on any basic job, to start off with a head, a best boy, and then 4 hammers. But oh well, our budget won't do that. So you go back to the fact that the people have just been saying now. Well, you want me to do this in this amount of time, then I'm going to need this many people. Now they will all be working all the time, and this is where we sometimes have intense discussions with the producers. At a certain point in time, I'm going to need 6 people to do what you want to do in the next 2 hours. And they go, well, I've only got 4. Well, and then it's going to take longer. Or I can say, fine, you give me this amount of people, and I'll tell you how long it's going to take. And if I'm ahead of time, then you're ahead of the game. But if I'm lagging behind, then you're waiting on me. And everybody on the whole film crew then goes, oh, look, we're waiting on them again. Mm-hmm. And so you really got to make sure that you do discuss up front what is realistically possible in the amount of time that you've got with the amount of manpower. And this works both for all the electrics and all the grips, whatever. You need a certain amount of people at certain times. We're not going to use them all the time. I'm sorry, but right. If you want this to happen in a meaningful time frame today, then this is what we're going to need.
That makes sense.
I'd like to just add that, if I could.
Go ahead, Mike.
We deal with what's called time estimates, a lot, and it's meaning that they'll give us a certain amount of time to get our situation where it needs to be, so they can roll the camera and get the shot. So if we're meeting our time, there's a confidence that gets built early on in the process, and then there's an understanding that well, maybe they do know what they're talking about, and we do need this stuff. So there's a kind of like warming up period that happens sometimes in the beginning, and it's good to know how long things are going to take, and that's what the importance of what Earl and I and Jim and Zoot and their best boys to figure out, like, okay, we're going to be ready for you at this point in time. So it really is kind of hitting your marks, that kind of creates a confidence that we're all on the right page, and that the things that you're telling them are a reality. And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, John, let me just say one of our goals, and I know all these guys are on the same page, is they don't wait on us. We try our best, grips and electrics too, and cameras the same way, to always be ready and not wait on us. And that comes up to the crewing problem. If you don't have enough guys, then it could be a problem in the whole day could be shot, because it's just a process. You don't have enough guys. You don't have enough to do what they want.
Right. Yeah. So let's do a little story time. All of you have worked on some titles that everybody's going to recognize. So let's go around the grid here and just get an interesting story, or what you remember from being on some of these sets. And I'm just going to throw out a couple of titles, but feel free if you want to tell us something else. So let's start with Earl. Earl, I know you worked on Baywatch, Dolphin Tale, and Dolphin Tale 2. Munich. Anything from in there that you want to tell people a fun story?
I don't know if it's fun, but it might be interesting. I in 2005, as you mentioned, I did a movie called Munich, which was about, it didn't do too well, so hopefully some of you saw it, but it was about the massacre of the Israeli athletes at the '72 Olympics, which was, I was in high school. So I knew about it. So I was asked by a key grip I'd worked with on Bad Boys 2 in Miami prior to that, in 2002, to work on that film. I was really nervous about taking the job. I mean, normally you just say, "Oh yeah, great," but it was a real high profile director, and I was nervous. And in addition to that, logistically, we were filming in like a bunch of different countries. We started, it was going to start in Malta. We were going to go to Budapest, Hungary, and then to France, and then finally we finished up in New York City. So it was, as a best boy, it was like, oh my God, can I do this? And in addition to that, all the people on that job had already worked with the director like 10 other movies, so I'm like the new guy, and like, trying to do this big, the budget really wasn't that big. I think I know it was under 100 million, but still it was the pressure of working with this director who's not a bad guy, but you have to be on your A game, and you have to be ready for anything. So we start filming in Malta, like the first week in July in 2005. We're basically, and we're doing a movie about terrorism. So we're like the first week, I think July 1st we started, something like that. And on July 7th, all the news reports are going like they just blew up a bus in London and killed 50-something people on a bus in London. It's a terrorist attack. And that's what we're doing a movie about. So production's like getting real nervous. Well, they had a reason to be nervous, because a week later, one of our grip trucks caught fire in the base camp. So quite naturally, the newspapers, I have them in my file somewhere, but all the newspaper articles are like, terrorist attack in Malta, blah, 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 because it's so close to the one in London. So that was come to find out it was just a mechanical failure. Something with the truck had caused it to catch on fire, and then because of all the stuff that was in it, it just got worse and worse because of the flammable material in there. But that was a scary moment. I mean, I'm overseas. The news all over the world is like, they're like blowing up stuff everywhere, and I'm in another country. My family's here in Florida, and like, I'm over there. So it was a bit scary. So our security ramped up a bit. We finished filming in Malta, and we head to Hungary to start filming the assassination scene, which is where the people come into where the athletes were staying in their dorm, that they break in there and start killing all these guys. Well, which made it real, which we didn't know till like a few days later, because they didn't tell us anything. The guy who played, there was a Israeli wrestling coach who got killed in that attack. The guy who played the wrestling coach in the film was the actual son of the guy who got killed.
Wow.
He's playing his dad. He's doing a scene, getting killed, recreating his dad getting killed. So that was like, you hear that as like sends chills up your spine.
Yeah.
So that was like a really, not only weird, but a really surreal thing. Or like, how can you play your dad getting killed? It's weird. So anyway, but not a lot of people know that, but the actual actor played his dad. So that was one interesting thing. And the other thing, one more thing from that film is like, we were there on September 5th, which was the anniversary of when that happened. And we were filming on an airfield in Hungary. It was a doubling for Munich, for Germany, somewhere in Germany it was doubling for. And they called everybody, gather around, and we're all saying, oh hell, they're pulling the plug, they're scared, stuff blowing up everywhere, we're going to be sent home. But what it was, the director, he said, we're going to say a prayer for all these guys that just lost their life on today. We're filming that day, the same date, but back in 72, we're on the airfield where another event happened with an airplane and a helicopter, another bad event. And we had a moment of silence, had a prayer for all the guys that get killed, and then we continued filming. But it's moments like that, the movie didn't do too well, but things like that, I'll never forget. It was just a moving experience to work on that film.
Wow. I didn't know you were going to go there, Earl.
No.
But that's
Where'd you think
amazing.
it was
That's amazing.
going?
Like, Well, I mean, I think it goes to show that, I mean, what we do isn't always glamorous. It's not always fun and
Right.
games. I mean, there's serious topics
Right.
in there that.
I
that
mean,
we're-
and similar to that, I mean, I was going to
stories.
talk about Dolphin Tale too, and I'll just do very briefly. We were filming that. I did both of them, and that's another one where, at certain moments, you look around at the crew, and there were people crying because they were disabled. As most people know, the dolphin that was at that aquarium had its tail was cut off, so they had a fake tail they put on it, just like kids who would be disabled and they put a fake leg or a fake arm. These kids would come visit the aquarium to see that dolphin and to bond with that dolphin, and you wouldn't believe that they related to that dolphin.
Yeah.
And you would see that, and I'm telling you, there wasn't a dry eye on that set when that would happen, because it was very moving.
Yeah. Jim, you got anything from Bad Boys for Life, Bloodline, or Black Widow you can share? Any fun story? I should say interesting story, because Earl didn't share fun stories, but interesting stories.
What comes to mind on Bad Boys is we had a situation where they were going to film in a penthouse. Well, they did. They filmed in a penthouse that was like 30 floors up on the beach, Miami Beach. And the DP, we scouted it, and the DP wanted some M90s up there, which are 9,000 watt lights, 9Ks. He wanted 2 of them up there, and I worked with locations and tried to cable up the side of the building, which we've done before, or in the stairwell, you run the cable down the middle of the stairwell. They wouldn't have it. They didn't want a generator at the base of their property. So our solution was to source a step-down transformer, which was about 800 pounds, put it on an elevator, take it up to the roof, the rooftop power room, and tie in there, and then step down the 480 volts down to usable power, which is 208, 120, 3-phase for the 9Ks. It was a job. It was a lot of work to figure that out and to get into that room and step it down. We had a similar thing on Bad Monkey, which was shot here in Miami, also, where we had to put in some step down transformers for the power there. There wasn't enough power in that building where we did the filming. Black Widow, which was in Atlanta, and I was the rigging gaffer. On that, we built a bunch of condors. I remember building a bunch of condors for that. And condors are the aerial platforms, aerial work platforms, AWPs, which I recommend, once again, getting a card, OSHA card, or a certified card for the condors and forklifts and whatnot. Everybody should know how to operate those things. But we Black Widow, we built these condors with these soft suns, big lights. They 6 feet across or more, very heavy. We built 4 of them, and all we did was hide them. We never used them. And Zoot knows, this is what we do. We hide stuff sometimes. Rigging will lay a bunch of stuff out. We come to the set and we go, oh, we got to move all that. That's in the way, or that they change the shot. They look down the road the other direction, or something happens that's, that wasn't planned. But regardless, John, that was the thing about Black Widow they had a lot of money. Marvel movies do tend to have a lot of money, I think. Yeah, we just moved them out of the way for like 4 or 5 days. That's all we did. The Irishman, which was shot in New York mostly, but they came here for the beach work on Miami Beach at one of the old hotels. They had a problem in the middle of the night before they shot. Well, they had about 100 extras or more that were in period costume and makeup. And the call was real early, like 5 a.m. So these makeup people had to be in super early, 3 a.m. Well, they set up in a neighboring hotel. And what happened was, I think the hotel staff just took off on them. So here it was, 20 makeup stations in a banquet room in a hotel without power. So these makeup people were scheduled to come in, these actors, stand-ins, background, scheduled to come in, get their makeup, get their costumes, but no power. So they can't do curling irons, no lights, nothing. So I had to call a guy in the middle of the night to get a generator, cable, distro, to go cable the hotel, in this satellite hotel, where the extras were in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., to get power to the makeup stations. And yeah, those are some of the things with the shows you were talking about,
Right.
John.
Again, the glamour side of things.
The glamour, yes.
Zoot, give us an interesting story.
Well, let's see, where do we start? The last film I did, was Gifted. We shot that mainly in Savannah because we don't have any kind of budget here for filming or whatever. And we ended up in a hotel for the final scene in Atlanta. And this hotel was very, very posh. They were very, very proud of themselves and everything. So we had to cable all around this hotel, but none of it could be seen, because even though we were using the back passageways where only the hotel staff were or whatever, none of it could be seen. So basically, our initial cable pass was maybe 400 feet. Well, that's okay. We won't lose too much power that way. Well, it turns out, okay, well, actually, now you've got to go around this corner and that corner. You've got to go over that roof, come back down again. So you end up with 1,000 feet of cable.
Yeah.
So oh dear. So now what do we do? Well, you make it work, whatever. You try and put as much power you can down and use, which my guys didn't particularly like, because we started off with, oh, well, we can run this with a lighter gauge cable. Then we had to go to a heavier cable. Then we had to go to running 2 lots of what's called 4-aught, which is the largest cable we deal with on a regular basis, just because of the power drop.
Mhm.
And all this had to happen in like 3 hours before we got there. Again, we couldn't be seen either, so we had to do it at night, ready to shoot the next day. And then, of course, after you shoot all the scenes or whatever, then you've got to go back again and take it all out again. So this comes back to, at certain times you need a rigging crew. So we didn't know this ahead of time, that we were going to have to run 4 times the amount of cables we started off with. Otherwise, we'd have made precautions and earlier. So that was Gifted.
Mike, you've worked on the marvelous Mrs. Maisel when they came here, Venom, Manifest, Magic City. Anything from there worth sharing?
Well, I think the marvelous Mrs. Maisel example would be a lot of fun to talk about, because it's where we're working. The New York crew that was shooting is still up there doing their job. They're sending the information down that has to be done ahead of time, because in this case where actually one of the episodes that they did while they were here garnered a Emmy Award for the DP, David Mullen, which was really super nice, because it was a combination of their crew and our crew making that stuff happen. So that was very cool. And the thing about that show is the people at the top, the directors, are very much involved in, how they want the camera movement to look. So what happens is there's this thing I call like running on all cylinders, when everything is like working beautifully and everybody's communicating, and we're really, we're in a groove that is just feels really good and powerful. And we hope that works on every show, but it doesn't always, but in this particular case it did. And we were doing these crazy elaborate 1-minute intros that were choreographing crane movement with a magnetic release so the camera could be operated. There was one thing where we were outside on a 50-foot techno crane coming off the building. The crane came down, released the camera operator followed them into the lobby, reconnected it to another crane, and pushed through the lobby with 100 extras. And so very elaborate shot. And then there was another one that we did, which was the opening to one of the episodes, where the work that I needed to do ahead of time was basically make sure that the crane that we had, which was very large Chapman leather crane that had a water housing, and the water housing is where you're able to put the camera into the water, and it came up and did all this, synchronized swimming shot that carried the lead actress in, very elaborate. And we needed to make sure that that crane wasn't going to go through the deck because the pool deck, because the deck was hollow and it was the parking garage was underneath. So meeting with engineers and the city and all this other stuff, and then access to get the equipment onto the deck and everything. It was a very elaborate shot, but I mean the end result was just absolutely beautiful, and it just makes you feel really good about being able to accomplish this. It's there's a level of stress that unless you weren't in that position, you never experienced. But is this actually going to happen? Are we going to actually be able to pull it off? And fortunately, we did, and it's a beautiful shot. So I would use that as an example out of many things that I've had the opportunity to do over my career. Earl and I, and Jim and I, and Zoot and I doing our island movies. Everything is, it's when it comes together, when, like I said, when it's running on all cylinders, basically there's nothing like it. It's beautiful, especially when the shots come out. They're pretty, it's what the people are looking for. And then it resonates with the audience in this case. So, I think that's
those are all good stories, but let me talk a little bit on the flip side. This is a good question from Sandy in the chat. Reputation is everything in our business. How do you handle when non-local crew comes to town and blames the locals for mishaps when it's not the locals' fault? It's not our team's fault. You obviously want to get more work referred, but you got to walk that political tightrope. So, Mike, why don't we stick with you? You're nodding your head there, so you probably have something to say there.
Well, I mean, that whole blame game thing it's unfortunate, because what we want to strive for is making it good, not making it bad. I mean, the money that's being spent by the studio, whatever the budget is, you don't ever want to be in a position where they're not getting what they want and it's falling on your shoulders. I think we have to be quite honest, at this point, it's a little harder to put together an A-list crew just because of the people that have, moved on to other places where there's, incentives and the other things that go into it. So sometimes, maybe it's a little bit valid, but I think the whole blame game thing is a lot of times it's not founded. To me, it feels like it's just trying to take the pressure off themselves for not being prepared for what, is necessary to get the job done. And it from their part, I mean, but I mean, I think that it's inevitable that that's potentially going to be something that comes up. Unfortunately, I'm sure we've all dealt with that. And I think it's a great question, Sandy, but I would love to hear her answer.
There's something else I want to add to that, whatever.
Please.
We live and work continuously in this environment or whatever. And sometimes out-of-town crew will come in and want you to do something that is just blatantly either unsafe or is not realistic in the time frame that they want to do it. And it comes down to the head of the department to say, well, that's just not going to work here. And by the way, when you finish pissing off all the locals around here, you're leaving. We're still here. We have to deal with the aftermath of that or whatever. So that's something that ties well in with what Mike's saying. We continue to work here. We know what the locations are like, and we know our limitations or whatever. And out of town people will just go, oh, well, this is how we do it in LA. Well, I'm sorry, maybe you should still be in LA.
Yeah.
Let me say one more small thing based on what Zoot just said. It's like the conditions here are not like they are in other parts of the country. I mean, we have elements here that these people will come by the end of the first day. They're as red as a cherry, and they just don't. The heat and the wind and the other things that go into shooting here, especially obviously exteriors. I mean, sometimes they're not prepared for that. They don't understand the conditions, and they're not always prepared. And I think that we hear a lot about, oh man, it's so hot, or the humidity or whatever, right? I mean, all the time. There's a certain pacing that you have to, and preparation that you have to, be ready to deal with, especially on a 12-hour day. You're seeing the sun come up and you're watching it go down. So every phase of the sun that's coming through is affecting, you know, your energy, you know, like, you know, you have to stay hydrated. You have to, you know, do things to protect yourself. And like, you know, obviously with bloodline in the Keys, you know, with the no-see-ums and the bugs at night, I mean, mosquitoes as big as I've ever seen anywhere I've ever been, you know, it's like, and that's every day the sun goes down, here they come, you know, we're getting ready for our night work, you know, so.
Well, we definitely won't put the mosquitoes on the Chamber of Commerce video, that's for sure. So I want to, you know, we're mindful of our time here. We're approaching 10:30. And if anybody in the audience does have questions, go ahead and use that hand raising function. We've already hit a couple in the chat, and I'm going to try and get, you know, one or two more, but want to be mindful of everybody's time here. So let me just ask this for Jim from the chat. You know, obviously, you know, we talked about looking ahead and anticipating. What do you do when you have a DP that their direction is give me more light, give me less light? You know, you're trying to help them, but they're not really helping you help them. So talk about kind of that interpersonal communication challenge that sometimes you run into on set.
I don't know that it's an interpersonal challenge. It's more of, you know, some DPs get comfortable with their gaffer. Maybe they know them and they just rely on them to do some lighting for them. Other times they may be preoccupied, busy with cameras, and they say, hey, just get me some more light over here. And if they don't tell you how to do it specifically, if they don't tell you to bring out an 18K or bring out a 1K, you know, if they don't tell you exactly how to do it, then you kind of have to think back to the scout and what you've done with that cinematographer before, how they like to light. I was on the beach the other day with a British cinematographer, and he was busy with the director in the tent, in the little pop-up tent with the DIT guy. And I just brought a light out because I saw that we were in a situation where we needed a little more light. And we'd been using an S360 panel earlier. I figured that's his light of choice. I brought it out, and I was right. But that's, you have to kind of look into the past, what you've done with the cinematographer. Now, if you've done nothing, then you make a guess and you try to read his mind or her mind, as the case may be. You just make a guess as far as what light they want or what quality. Maybe it's not a light, maybe it's just a silk. And then you turn to your grip brothers and say, please, we need a little help. But it happens that they just say, bring me a light or make this brighter, or, you know, and then you got to just pull the rabbit out of the hat.
Yeah. Earl, let me ask you a question. Similar to what we have in the chat, you know, we've talked a lot about some of the bigger budgets, the bigger titles, but talk about independent films, you know, smaller budgets, smaller crew. Talk about the transition of still being able, you know, needing to get the job done, but maybe not having as many resources available to do it.
I haven't done much of that genre independent, but I can probably speak a little bit about it. I think basically a few people need to be on the same page. The producer usually on those projects, or, you know, obviously they're looking at, it's all like Zoot said earlier, it's all about money. It's not about art anymore. It's about how much we're spending, how much we're gonna, you know, basically they have a line item of this is all we're gonna spend. Now the DP may be an up and coming, usually on those independent projects, it's a young guy, typically young guy trying to make a name for himself. He wants to eventually win an Oscar, you know, 20 years. But normally those guys typically are young guys who've done maybe a few short films. Jim and Zoot will have 20 or 30 years more experience than the guy. Well, the guy, you know, he's just learning and he wants to make a name for himself. So he will say, I need this. The producer saying, this is all we have to spend. So you have to have it needs to be a compromise, and it needs to be discussed ahead of time, because, you know, his vision may entail you have to spend more money. You have to have more people. The producer's vision, this is all I have to spend. So there has to be a meeting in the middle. I'm not saying those projects are still going to be done. They're still going to get done, but they need to be done safely, and they need to be done on budget, obviously, on the producing side, and they still want them to look halfway decent. So it's a you know, there's no rule, but you have to. People need to talk, and they need to sit down, and they need to say, "This is what we have. This is what we can do, and can we make it work?" And you go from there. I mean, you're not going to make a Bad Boys 2 movie that was, $150 million on a, under $1 million indie. He may want to do, like, they'll reference, Jim will tell you, they'll come on, in the tech scout. Oh, we want to do this. You remember, just like Bad Boys 2, when they were doing all this stuff. And we're looking at each other, well, this ain't Bad Boys 2, and we don't have the money to do it. You don't realize what went into doing that. Like the other day I was on a job, the guy said, well, we want to do the stuff just like the I know what it was, Ford versus Ferrari movie. We want to do all that car stuff just like that. I said, you realize that was all on motorized sliders on a vehicle that wasn't even self-driving. It was on a trailer, and they had motorized cameras and remote heads on a trailer. What you're trying to do is a car free driving on the highway. I said, it's a whole different animal. But he didn't realize what went into getting that shot on that big movie, and he's trying to do it on a small thing. So anyway, long story short, people have to talk, and people have to realize what their restraints are. Yeah,
that makes sense. Jim, last month we spent an entire Film Florida Friday talking about unions here in Florida, and some of the challenges, the opportunities, those type of things. I know you're a member of a union, unless I got my information correct. Give me your just perspective on the benefits of being part of the union here in Florida.
Yeah, John. I'm a member of Local 477, which is the Florida statewide IATSE union. We do the movies and commercials, like we're talking about, movies and TV shows and commercials, like we're talking about now. The benefits of being in the union is, besides solidarity, is the training, the chance to work on big shows as they come down here. When I say come down and come to Florida, and crew up, and they're almost always union. I don't know if I can even think of a TV or a movie that's come here non-union recently offhand. That gets back to the independence you were talking to Earl about. The union also has insurance, a group plan. You can't get canceled out of it, which is great. Benefits, pension, welfare fund, and it's a good place to learn. They have the Training Trust Fund, TTF, which is part of their the schooling and whatnot. You become a member, then you can get on these classes and these bulletins, whatnot, and hone your craft. The other things are it's interesting to read contracts. To me, I mean, I find it interesting to go through some of that paperwork and whatnot, and you can see that stuff when you're a member. I'm sure the other guys have some other things, but those are things that stand out to me with the union: solidarity, the benefits, and the chance to work on quality work.
Any of the other, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I mean, the union provides a certain amount of protection for the workforce. I have done independence when we've shot for 10 hours without a break. Well, we've got to get this done. That doesn't happen on a union shoot. You usually have somebody there, a union steward, who takes care of things, make sure there is adequate water for people, that we are following the safety rules. They do get real meal breaks with real food, and not sort of, a ham sandwich or something for the rest of the day. So those are some of the additional benefits of it. And as Jim says, the safety classes are a really good place for people to look into and start with union work.
Good.
Yeah, it keeps the production production company honest and accountable. When you have the strength of the union behind the contract, whatever tier that it's under. And it's good because if they're going to make a decision that goes against, personal well-being, whether it's eating or resting or whatever, they're going to pay for it. So there's that responsibility because there's accountability that is, a much, when you're going into a situation where there's a union contract, you have that confidence and knowing that you have the support of the contract itself and all the things that entails. And not to mention the network, and we're able to pull from different parts of the state to make different things happen, because they have the option of paying for somebody to come in and work as a distant hire or nearby hire, and the pieces and parts that go into that make it something that is going to be more legitimate and just safer, and you can go to work with more confidence.
Good. This one's for anybody that wants it from the chat. We talked a lot about the communication you guys have with the DP cinematographer types. How important is your relationship or your communication with the director?
Depends.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mike.
it really
Go first.
depends. Sometimes there is an interaction, there's a collaboration that's happening based on how, certain things get, like with, especially maybe on the smaller shows, you'd see that there's going to be more interaction and more, communication with the people that are in a higher position.
Earl, you had something to say?
I think on the larger stuff, the larger stuff, we don't interact as much with the director, although you're there within earshot, because your DP is normally interacting with the director, but you're usually, in the case of the key grip or the gaffer, they're usually within earshot and they're hearing what the director's vision is and what he's explaining it to the DP. So you're there, you're hearing it, but you don't on the larger stuff, you don't really go to the director and give your, make a comment or tell him, well, maybe we should do this. That's strictly, normally it's your boss, your DP interacting with the director. But on the smaller stuff, like Mike says, and even on commercials you will, but on episodic and features, typically on the larger stuff, we don't interact. We're in the production meetings, in the prep, the best boy and the key grip normally. We're on the tech scout, and we hear that's on the tech scout. The director is normally the one running the show. He's saying that what he's planning on doing like 3 or 4 weeks down the line. It all changes anyway, but at least you have an idea of what because and Jim can tell you, the tech scout, basically all that tells you is where you're going to park your car. Because when you get there 3 weeks down the line, it's like, Jim and I are looking at each other. Didn't we say we're going to shoot looking this way? And it's normally where all the grip trucks are parked, all the electric trucks are parked. First shot of the morning, they're looking at the trucks, and the teamsters are going, well, we said we weren't going to, and you can't say anything. I mean, you can amongst ourselves, but the guy's going to, he's the boss, he's the main boss, the director is. So he's going to look the way he wants to look, even though 2 weeks prior to that, he said he wasn't going to look that way. But just is how it goes. You got to be able to, you got to be very flexible. And
Earl, what this reminds me of is set etiquette. Really, you hire, as the gaffer, I don't talk to the director on a show at all, really. I mean, maybe say hi in the morning. But I remember on Critical Thinking, which was down here in Miami, the chess movie, John Leguizamo starred and directed it. And it was an independent, it was a little bit lower budget, but he was amicable and he talked to all of us. But once again, there you go, a little smaller show, as opposed to these big Bad Boys or Black Widow. On Black Widow, I didn't even see the director. Of course, I was upset.
I think I think that's
but
what Kevin,
it's just
Kevin's
goes to
follow-up.
that, yeah.
Yeah, Kevin's follow-up in the chat, I think speaks to exactly what you're saying is for those that are in the audience that may be directors or want to be directors, what can the director do to engage you guys to make you feel like your jobs are more enjoyable as opposed to just, you know, the laborer guys over there? Like, is there something the director can do to engage to make it more enjoyable for you guys?
One thing that comes to mind is, does the director have a vision or know what he actually wants to see? A lot of this happens in commercials. You'll set up a scene or whatever, and the director will go, well, no, this isn't really what I want. So we've now spent, you know, an hour or 2 hours in the morning setting up a scene that we'd had discussed or whatever, and he's going to change his mind. Well, do you really know what you want? And often a director doesn't know what he wants through lack of experience or whatever until he actually sees something. So you actually set up a scene for him, and then the DP will say, okay, well, this is what we've got right now. And the director will go, well, no, you know, as Earl was saying, oh, no, I want to look the other way. Well, that gets very frustrating for the crew that have spent 2 hours of their day trying to be helpful to you, and then you not having a clear idea in your head of what the scene should actually look like.
I think what means a lot to me, and since that was a potential director that was given that question, and Jim could probably echo this, it means a hell of a lot to not only to me, but to the crew, when at the end of the day, the DP and the director, when they're walking out to get in their cars, they said, thanks everybody, great day. It really means, it goes a long way. It really does. And when I've been on shows where the DP would go to every person every day that was obviously not walking around for 30 minutes looking for everybody. But if he's walking through and he sees people, he's, you know, prior to COVID, shaking hands, saying, thank you, Earl. Thank you, Jim. Great day. We'll see you in the morning. That means a lot. Even though they may not mean, you know, hopefully they mean it, but it means a lot rather than just leaving the premises and getting in their car and going home. I'll give you, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I'll say it. What the hell? Jim was on the show. We had an actor on a show recently. Last day of the show, his last day. We all knew it was his last day. Normally on a show, the AD, when that actor finishes a scene, the AD would say, gather around. That's a picture wrap for X. I won't give the name. It's a picture wrap for Joe. Yes, everybody give him a hand. Everybody claps. Joe would say a few words. Thank you. Thanks, Miami. We've been here for a few months. We love it. Hope to see you guys again. Well, in this particular instance, that actor, they said cut, the scene was over, the actor walked away, he got in his car and he went home. And that was the last we saw of that guy, back to wherever he lived, didn't say a word. So that was like, that sticks with me, and I still remember that. And it wasn't that long ago, but I don't know, Jim could maybe chirp in on situations like that.
Well, if you don't say thank you to, or goodbye, or thank you to the crew or anything, then we talk about you. So that's it. And that's what we're doing right now. Thanks, Earl.
So we're running out of time here. I just want to give each of the four of you like one opportunity, any parting shot, any, whatever it is you want to add as we wrap up here. Mike, why don't you go first?
Well, I would say thanks for having me, and this has been really a lot of fun. Good seeing everybody. I would say to aspiring grips that are coming up, electricians too, any department really, is always try to be learning. Always try to understand what is going on around you, how you can bring your skills. In a lot of cases, a good grip might have a background in like carpentry or auto mechanics. There's things like that. Bring the things that and you like to do to to the job and always, like sometimes, like, and Earl talked about the cell phone earlier. It used to be when the cell phones weren't on set, people would be over at staging where we'd have our gear. If they didn't know how to set a C-stand, if they didn't know how to, what a flag does, they could be practicing, they could be honing their skills in some of this downtime that is happening during, the day, the day's work. And when I see that, I'm just like, okay, that person, they care about this. And if you really want to impress somebody and you want to get called again and you want to, really become a good grip, then always be focusing, jump in, help the dolly grip, do their setting of their, track and learn about these different things. And you can elevate much quicker. And then you can also make it, show a good example that it's something that you are passionate about. And so, and that's going to work and doing a good job, basically.
Good. Zoot?
That's all right.
I started out doing stage work, and it's a group effort. We're all an ensemble. We work together, and this is an important point for this grips and gaffers. We all work together. We're part of the same team. We're not trying to fight each other to make each other look better. So communication between both the electrics and the grips is tantamount or whatever. And the fact that we do work together as a unified ensemble, when a shot comes out at the end or whatever, and both sides have worked on it together, you feel good. You can then say, fine, okay, guys, let's go and have a beer and talk, whatever. Working together is paramount.
Good. Earl?
Yeah, I think my final remarks will be what I see here in Florida is we have a lot of people who are like always saying, oh, how come we don't have work? How come we don't have this? And, we're not getting any incentives, blah, blah, blah. But they don't get involved. There's a lot of apathy. If you want to stay here in Florida and you want to have a future here, you need to get involved. You need to join Film Florida, which I think we all are members. But people on the street need to get involved. They need to, instead of waiting till session's over and the legislative session just started, instead of waiting till it's over and say, oh, how come they didn't do anything? They don't care about us. Well, did you write your senator? Did you write your representative? If you didn't, I don't want to hear you. Shut up, because I don't want to hear it. If you want change, you need to speak up. If you want change, you need to write letters. Like right now, John's asking for a big letter campaign because I think they're getting ready to close two things. They're getting ready to close the film office. They want to close the film office in Tallahassee, and they want to eliminate the sales tax exemption for production companies, that are coming in and they have a write-off right now. They're trying to eliminate that. But we need to let them know that we live here, we work here, and you can't do that. They need to we need some help. And otherwise, if it continues on the downward slope, like others have said, and I'll say, we're going to lose more people. Right now, we're on thin ice. And like Mike said, you get a big show in, basically we've got maybe we can put one crew together of people who do motion picture and television. It was a whole nother thing. There's a lot of commercial guys that won't do what we do, television and movies. So that's a whole nother dynamic for another session, but get involved. That's my big thing.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Earl. Thank you. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Earl. And I wanted to point out that House bill, I think it's HB 5, trying to get rid of the film office, doesn't have a companion Senate bill. So hopefully it just goes away, which it should. I don't see any reason why Tallahassee would want to do that. And this points out an interesting thing, which is Florida, for all our diversity, our locations, our mansions, our yachts, our waterways, our beaches, we have no film incentive like Georgia and New Mexico and Carolinas and Louisiana and so many other states, California, New York. I mean, I can go on and on. I think the Northeast has their number. It's something we need. We need this here in Florida. It brings commerce, it brings work, hotels, bars, people come in. You know, when they shoot a big movie in a state, they don't hire every single person locally. They bring in 20, 30% of the people, actors, camera people, other people. And these people spend money. They spend a lot of money. Hotels, like I said, and just it's been studied. It's a good thing for states. These states wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't good, if it didn't generate commerce, if it didn't generate money for local communities. So I think this is something that everybody needs to get on board and support. Like Earl says, write to your senators, write to your congressman up in Tallahassee. I sent a letter out yesterday about this HB 5, and you know, put your best foot forward. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jim. And I mean, we could talk facts and figures until the cows come home. We're preaching to the choir in this meeting. What we really do need, like both of you said, is we need people engaged. I put information about HB 5 in the chat box. There's plenty of other information. We would encourage everybody, like we always do, encourage everybody to join Film Florida and join the legislative committee and get engaged and get involved, because it's very easy the day after session ends to get on Facebook and fire off some angry messages about how come this didn't happen, how come that didn't happen. It actually takes a little bit of effort, but we believe that in the end it is worth it to get involved. So that's going to wrap up another edition of Film Florida Friday. Thanks to Zoot, Jim, Earl, and Mike for being with us, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're going to be back next month with another edition of Film Florida Friday. We have a really fun discussion with DPs and DITs. We put the registration link in the chat box, and that will go out on email blast as well over the next couple of weeks. I want to thank our Film Florida members for their continued support. If you're not a member of Film Florida, we hope you'll consider joining the organization at filmflorida.org. Remember, the organization is funded entirely by our members. So if we don't have enough membership support, we don't exist as an organization. Keep up with everything we're doing on our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And make sure you're checking out the Film Florida podcast on Apple, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and a bunch of other podcast providers. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody for watching and putting up with Earl.
Take it easy, guys. Nice to see you.
All right, guys. See you, Jim. See you, Mike.
Yeah.
John.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.